Hi, I'm Megan Dobro. I'm the founder and CEO of SafeTiva Labs. We're in Westfield, Massachusetts, and I'm here to talk about how to ethically achieve very fast turnaround times in cannabis testing. Everyone wants to be the fastest, but it really needs to be done right and without sacrificing accuracy or customer service. So with this talk, I'm hoping to show you that it is possible and a worthy endeavor. So here's what I will be talking about: why turnaround time matters, maintaining accuracy, the importance of that, what kind of investment you'll need to make to do this well, how to have an efficient workflow, some things to consider, a little bit about instrumentation, some notes about automation, including sample pickup in the turnaround time, and then a few tips about how the team and quality assurance matters for the people side of the turnaround time. I also really want to give a disclaimer that we don't have it all figured out. I am not talking from a point of claiming to be an expert at all of this and doing things perfectly, but that every day it's our goal to make a little bit of progress, learn from mistakes, and adapt as we go. I say everyday progress is our goal. Because we are a relatively new lab in Massachusetts, we really commend the older labs for surviving the heyday, paving the way for newer labs to enter the market. And SafeTiva has chosen to use turnaround time as our differentiator in terms of the competitive lab market space. So when I was getting into cannabis testing, I started thinking about it in 2019. At that time, I started studying the market in Massachusetts, and in October of that year, the Boston Globe came out with an article about stores, dispensaries having totally empty shelves. The market had just opened up legally a year prior, and this was a really big deal. There was a really high demand and the shelves were empty, and everyone thought that there was no supply, and that was the reason. But actually, it was because of the testing backlog. So this article was from Netta. They had a Brookline store that was interviewed, and they had these quotes. Producers are coming online exponentially, and the two labs that we had couldn't handle the number of tests. They had 1,000 pounds of flour tied up in testing, waiting for results. And it wasn't a production issue. It was an industry-wide issue with delays at testing labs. So that was what I was coming into this space hearing as the number one problem. So I conducted some interviews of potential clients of ours and asked them, what are your pain points? What do you wish were different about testing labs? And it was unanimously turnaround time was their hardest problem. Surprisingly, way above accuracy and price, they cared about turnaround time. A year later, we had many more labs on the market. And even then, turnaround time was still the number one complaint we were hearing about testing labs. It's usually now less than a week that labs are turning around results. And it's still the biggest complaint that we hear from producers, that they are having a hard time getting product out of the vault. Here's a picture of, this is just an example of what vaults can look like. This happened to be a picture from canopy growth in Canada, but we had toured a lot of facilities that had overflowing vaults and also empty shelves at dispensaries. So it was clearly a problem. Producers want to get product out of the vault sooner. They want to reduce their uncertainty. And so while they're waiting for test results, they can't be packaging, they can't be labeling. They have no idea what the destination of their product is going to be yet until they know that they've passed everything. And this is especially crucial for the small craft growers, facilities that have 1 to 5 grow rooms. They're usually doing maybe 1 or 2 harvests at a time, and they really need to sell that batch in order to pay their bills, pay their payroll. And they can easily get dropped from retail partnerships if they don't make their deadlines. And so we're still hearing it, even with turnaround times less than a week, that sitting on their hands for a week is crippling their business, and being able to get turnaround times be much faster would be a game changer. So at SafeTiva, I had the luxury of studying the industry for a while before really pulling the trigger and getting into it. It was my goal to build a lab that had the fastest results in Massachusetts. So I did a lot of research, and I had the luxury of starting from scratch and planning everything that we were doing to be designed for speed. From architectural design of the building to our staffing and equipment plans, and the scientific methods that we were using. So we've been able to achieve turnaround times, our median turnaround time is 26 hours. Our average turnaround time is about 29 hours. I've shown a graph because it really matters when we get the samples in during the day. That determines what time we can turn around the results the following day. But at 26 hours turnaround time for most of our samples, we're able to report results for most samples next day. 81% of samples are reported the next day. When we go to a second day, it's because we decided to rerun something. We weren't totally confident in one particular number. We decide to rerun it, or if an instrument goes down, that's when it can go to the second day. And I want to give a couple of caveats that we measure our turnaround time from the time the sample is dropped off at the lab to the time we deliver the COA to our clients. We don't have cutoff times for when samples can come into the lab. So if they come in at 4 p.m., the clock starts. Obviously, it's way better to get the samples in the morning, so you have that full day to process them. But we're not considering, we don't have a cutoff time. And one big caveat is that at SafeTiva, we're only open business days, Monday through Friday. And so we are not counting weekends in the schedule and in counting the time. So if your clients are concerned about the weekend time as well, we would just add shifts of staff to make sure that we're productive on those days as well. And we may go there in the future, but that's not what we're doing right now. I want to be really emphatically clear that accuracy has to be number one. And ethically getting fast turnaround times means never sacrificing accuracy. We're not cutting any corners in our accuracy or our customer service. We still want to take the time and do things the right way. A strong quality team that is being very careful and doing internal audits and keeping us in check will actually help with speed, because you won't have to redo things. It'll just be done right the first time. So it doesn't always add time to do things carefully and accurately. If you rush and you have to do it over again, then your turnaround time goes way up. ISO audits will catch any issues once a year, but it requires a serious commitment from the lab leadership to be maintaining our ethics and our commitment to accuracy every day. The other thing to know up front is that being fast is very expensive. It costs a lot of money to buy all of the equipment that you need, to build redundancy, to have the space that you need to be able to have multiples of your equipment and more staff. As the old saying goes, you can be fast, good, or cheap, but you can't be all three. And we've decided to focus on being fast and good. And that means that it was expensive to build our lab, and therefore our prices are a little bit at the higher end of the market. We don't charge extra for having rush times. Everyone is processed at the same speed. But again, based on our research, we found that price was not as concerning to clients as turnaround time was. Just want to make sure that I mentioned that this is not a grow as you go type of situation. This is a commitment between the business owners up front that you're making a heavy capital investment up front to build it from the beginning. This is not at all business advice, and we're still too young to say whether this approach works or not. So I cannot attest to that approach, but we knew that with the timing that we were coming into the market, we would need to differentiate in this way. And so we're riding on this strategy. But you can plan on, when you're going through your spreadsheets and you're planning how many pieces of equipment, how much staff, everything that you'll need, I would actually triple the number of capital, the number of dollars that you need to raise compared to if you were just building a lab, doing analytical testing in any other industry, or if you weren't concerned about turnaround time. So for the workflow, the goal is to be as efficient as possible. Efficiency is a common word that we use in our daily conversations. And there are many ways to implement efficiencies with varying impacts. There are consultants and COOs that you can hire who specialize in lab efficiency that will probably have much more to say on this topic than I will. So this is just what it looks like for us at SafeTiva. We don't allow lab line jumping. We have no ability to pay extra to get priority. Everyone is treated the same. That allows us to prep samples in batches and process them together on the equipment, and they can move through together. So we find that to be the most efficient way to not have to keep track of what samples are going first. They all flow through as they come in. We do accept walk-ins, so we could be surprised by samples that come in, but we advertise pretty well that we prefer a heads up, and there's booking links on our website that our clients use. To reduce bottlenecks, we recommend getting multiples of everything, and this is where the expense part comes in. That can mean analytical balances, scales across the board, pipettes, centrifuges, mortar and pestle, or however you're homogenizing your samples, glove dispensers, sinks, hoods, and then even up to the big instruments. I recommend getting doubles of everything when you can, and then watch how it goes for a while and be prepared to identify the bottleneck and then solve that problem, identify the next bottleneck and solve that problem, and just watch how it goes for a little while before making different investments. But in full recognition that some of this requires a lot of forethought and planning around how your building is structured and your furniture. The other thing is to think about the flow of movement. So we've designed everything to have a one-way flow of movement with many aisles. There's no long tables that go across the lab and make someone have to walk all the way around. We break it up with many aisles. When it's safe, we recommend keeping the doors open. Not every lab has the luxury of doing this, but we find that if people aren't having to go backwards in the process and everything is moving forward, that it just works really, really naturally for us. Okay, so with instrumentation, it'll be the biggest investment by far. It's it's a really hard decision to make upfront when you're planning your lab about which vendor you're going to go with, whether you're going to mix and match vendors or just choose one. Looking back on the decisions that we made, I highly recommend that you ask your vendors about run times specifically within cannabis methods. Ask about the service response times and get it in writing and hold them to a contract. Make sure that your instruments are set up for remote access so that you can check in on your runs that are happening overnight. Preloading your samples in the auto samplers and then being able to check them overnight means that you can either come in if something got stopped in the process, or you know that someone will need to come in early to deal with it. And then really helpful, which we didn't have, was working with a vendor who is very familiar with the cannabis space and can preload the methods during installation and provide app notes for many different sample types. That would have made a huge difference for us. In thinking about the bottlenecks, again, duplicating your capacity whenever you can is really helpful. So adding multiples of instruments, and again, it's very expensive. Making sure that all of your instruments have large auto samplers for when you have the throughput to demand that, so that your overnight runs are, you collect as much data as you can during sleeping hours. And then we also recommend finding a neighboring lab that you have a good relationship with and that you agree to be each other's buddy labs. And that can really help if an instrument goes down and you need to subcontract with them to get the results in. It would have to be a lab that you really trust with ethics and accuracy, because at the end of the day, it's your name on the COA going out to the client. But the buddy lab system can really help when you are out of consumables and it's going to take days to get them in, or anything that you need that comes up in the process. Buddy labs can be really nice, and sometimes this venture can be really lonely, so having a buddy lab is helpful. Some of you who are currently working in analytical testing labs are probably wondering about the biosystem as the number one question, because it is the biggest bottleneck in terms of the testing run times. This talk isn't meant to advocate for any particular vendor or platform, so I'll keep it relatively vague. But hopefully give you enough tools to do the research to be able to do what we've done at SafeTiva. It's an often overlooked area of cannabis labs in bio. Lots of labs have taken the approach that they're going to stack their staff full of chemists, and then biology will be an afterthought. Unfortunately, there's no magic bullet out there. There's no out-of-the-box bio solution out there that's going to satisfy your individual state requirements, be easy to use, be reliable and robust, and also fast. So this is going to take about 6 months of R&D with the platforms that exist out there to make it work for you, to get it to be more efficient. You're going to need experienced molecular biologists. It's one bio vendor advertises it to cannabis labs as a platform so easy even a chemist can run it, which is offensive. But also, a lot of labs like biosystems that they can just set it and forget it. And that works if you don't care about the speed. You can use petri dishes and film plates, and you can just load them up, put them in the incubator, and wait a few days. And that's certainly possible. But if speed is what you're going for, it's going to be a PCR based method. You're going to need something that's very sensitive, so you can either reduce or cut out your enrichment time. So in thinking about microbiome testing platforms, I recommend ask the vendor you're interested in to give you a starter kit and demo equipment in your lab so that you can run it hands-on. You can verify their validations. You can do your own validations and develop comfort with it and see what it's like up front, because there are a lot of claims out there that aren't true, and you need to do it yourself. You need to, if a vendor is claiming a particular runtime, ask them to see the blocks of time for how you're spending that time and make sure that you are satisfying all of the state requirements with the blocks of time that they show you on the schedule. But it really is something that you need to commit to hiring the right staff with molecular bio expertise to develop your own system in-house so that you can be fast. And we've been able to cut down the microbiome testing bottleneck from 27 hours, which is the next fastest platform out there, to 8.5 hours. So that's the only reason it's possible that we can get results back next day. But again, it's a serious endeavor with experienced people up front. Investing in automation is a great option when it makes sense. Some automation is actually more time consuming if you have a low sample volume. So it's not something you need to do upfront in terms of pipetting robots and other automated lab methods. You do need a good LIMS. Getting something that integrates with your instruments and the seed to sale tracking system in your state is really smart. Christina Pascoe is giving a talk as well about LIMS, so you can check that talk out specifically about how to choose a LIMS. And I mentioned auto samplers previously. Sizing them to your throughput really makes a difference so that you're collecting data without being hands-on. One other way that we are able to reduce the time clients are waiting is by having our own transportation vehicle. And we're not counting that time in the turnaround time, but it can really matter. And so here, I'll go one at a time here. By having your own vehicle, you can reduce the time the client is waiting when they have samples ready to go. There are labs in the States that they'll only go to certain areas on certain days of the week. So clients could be waiting up to 6 days to get that out the door. And so you should cut down that time before it even gets to your lab, if possible. It really does make a big difference. Controlling the schedule means that you can try to get samples in earlier in the day, which gives you more working hours to start processing. You can streamline the routes and not have stops to make, like third-party transporters they'll try to get as many clients in a day as possible, and they could pick up the lab samples in the morning and not get to you until the afternoon. So controlling the schedule and controlling the routes can make a big difference. You get fresher samples because they're not on the road or even being warehoused overnight in some places. So again, for accuracy, that really matters. You can also control temperature and have monitoring of temperature. And so that can ensure that you're getting fresh samples as well. The drivers can give the lab an accurate heads up about exactly what samples are coming, what tests have been ordered, and the ETA for when they'll be delivered in the lab. And for us, the metric manifests should have some of that information, but things change, and being able to have a heads up can allow the lab to prepare and do the advanced work to get things ready to go before the samples even arrive. And again, you get to control the client experience. It's really nice to have a relationship with your clients and they know who you are and you have open dialogue, and having your own transportation really makes a difference, we find, with relationship building and understanding what their operation is like. So instruments aside, consumables aside, the most important thing for any lab is to have a really great team. Attracting talented, hardworking employees and retaining them is it's way harder than I ever expected, but we've been really proud about the team that we've built, and I credit them a lot to the success in being able to turn around samples so fast. Everyone needs to have a primary position where they start when samples arrive in the door, so everyone knows their places, and so there's some level of routine there. But we really focus on cross training so that if something happens or someone is out that day, or someone gets really tied up, others can come in and help in that area as well. We find it also keeps everybody happy and satisfied because they get to learn more and they're not just doing the same thing over and over and over. Having a well-formed team, it's important for communication, keeping organized. Everyone is willing to pitch in wherever needed because they genuinely care about each other. And fast turnaround times really can add stress to the team. And so it's important to be upfront in the hiring process. That turnaround time is something that's really important to us, so that they know exactly what they're getting into and can make an informed decision. It's important to emphasize to our staff that they should be taking breaks, communicating their needs to us, and also pursuing passion projects that they're interested in the lab and doing R&D and using their brain in other ways and flexing their creativity. And in that way, they learn more. And I find they generally are more excited about coming to work in a testing lab. This is, again, I think the most important place to really invest in your people. It's also the hardest to achieve. I saw that Sean Opie is giving a talk as well about attracting and retaining employees. So that would be a great one to check out for this area. Having a strong quality assurance team, as I said earlier, it helps to avoid issues at the start, checking and frequently calibrating, reviewing data as they're generated. That makes it so that as soon as the last test results come in, the COA is generated, it goes through one final approval stage, and then it goes out to the client immediately. So the analysis of data is happening as it's coming out on the instrument, as it's being analyzed, as it goes into our LIMS, and then as it gets generated in our COA. There's different people reviewing the data and trying to catch any issues, so that by the time our COA is generated, the last approver isn't seeing anything shocking and then needing to go back and, worst case scenario, have to rerun something. So the analyst, reviewer, and approver should be different people. So that's it for my tips and tricks about keeping the turnaround time really low. I have included my contact information here and welcome anyone to reach out and ask any questions or follow up, and connect with us on social media. And we love connecting with other labs. I come from academia, so really value collaboration over competition and welcome conversation from anyone. Thank you very much. That's it.